night and his dad. Um, because, you know, every now and then you have a person that like you meet and you have a pinch me moment and you say to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm actually meeting this person. This person is giving me their time. And that was my experience with Dale's dad. But before I get into that, I just want to say that we have March is Women's History Month. So we have some programs that we're going to be doing special, one of which is Jane Schmecka, who is a professor over at Brookdale College, who is being actually honored this year with a big event at Branches. She will be at the library on Tuesday, March the 21st, with a program on Geraldine Thompson. Geraldine Thompson is the person that's attributed to Thompson Park and Brookdale, and she was a woman way before her time. And Jane has written a book about her. So I hope everybody can come. It's actually going to be at the library, this program, which is really exciting. And I hope you can join us. We're also we have a seed catalog that's amazing, a lot of indigenous plants, but we also have other plants. And you can just come in and take seeds and plant them in your garden. And hopefully in May, the first, I think Saturday in May, we're going to do some kind of seed plant event. So if you want to join us, you can always just email me. We also haven't done a musical program for adults since before COVID, and I'd really like to have some kind of jazz event this summer. So again, email me, let me know if you know any talent in our local area. We have a lot. And how we can move forward with that. The same with artists. Every 2 months, we feature a different artist in the library. So when you come in, there's always that back wall of different artists. And I'm always looking for new talent. So please let me know. Anyway, with that said, when I started this program, it was 8 years ago. We were like, you know, I said Gilda had helped me, and we were like, you know, I was trying to lay the groundwork, and I started to build. I knew it was way too big for me to do alone. So I thought, well, I'll bring in volunteers. So our guest tonight, Dr. Dale Caldwell, his dad, who was a minister and a friend of Martin Luther King's, and he had worked a lot in the South. He had just moved to Asbury Park, and he was like a real activist. I mean, he really truly was a legend. I have been accused of gushing when it came to him, but I was like put in his path. And I was told that he might be able to help me. So a couple years into the program, he came to the library, he met me, he gave me all kinds of ideas. And actually, after he did some programs. He's been to our program when we had it in-house with Dale, actually. And he actually changed his Black activism to try to convince the Baptist Church that homosexuality was something to be accepted. Now, at this point in time, I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, about 85 years old. And on his birthday at Barnes and Noble, on his birthday at 85 years old, he went to this like book signing, and Dale was there. And there was a heckler. And this man was like, he made me very uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, here's Dr. Caldwell, and he's just talking and, you know, being himself, and all the obstacles that he had to endure in his lifetime to accomplish what he did. And here he was still doing that. To me, that's a real hero. To me, you know, the things he did throughout his lifetime was always trying to make the system better, educate people. And Dale is very much followed in his footsteps. And Claire will introduce Dr. Caldwell, but there's no way we can tell you everything that he's done in his life. Like, that's the crazy thing about this program. We've gotten people of the caliber of Gilbert Caldwell and Dale Caldwell to come and volunteer their time and educate us and talk to us and lead a conversation. And for this, we are so blessed at the Red Bank Public Library. And I just want to thank you all so very much for joining us. And thank you so very much, Dr. Caldwell, for being here and following the work of your dad. He truly was a very inspirational man. And I only wish we had just one little tiny bit of him in all of us. So thanks so much. And Claire, I'm going to turn it over to you. And we have a great program tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, again, and welcome to tonight's program. It's our great pleasure to welcome Dr. Dale Caldwell, our presenter tonight. As Linda said, along with his father, the late Reverend Dr. Gilbert Caldwell, civil rights icon, they have actually previously presented powerful in-house programs here at the library. So it's wonderful to have Dr. Caldwell back. He is actually carrying on his father's legacy by creating Dr. King's beloved community through innovative educational, employment, and entrepreneurial programs. He is the pastor of Plainfield's Covenant United Methodist Church in Plainfield, New Jersey. He has recently been appointed the first African-American president of Centenary University's 156-year history. Okay, he has extensive leadership experience in education and community affairs. And he's currently the executive director of the Rothman Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Fairleigh Dickinson University, where he chairs the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Council, which is leading the university's diversity initiatives. So many accolades, and there's just too many wonderful things to present, but we're so happy to have Dr. Caldwell here with us tonight. And I would definitely love to just turn the program over to him tonight. Thank you, Dr. Caldwell.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's hard to follow that introduction. So I'll say, in conclusion, we're going to, so both of I just sent out this morning the invitation. And so we have folks from around the country here. And so I'm just honored that all of you took time out of your crazy schedules, with little notice to come out tonight. For many of you, there's some local folks here, but it's an honor. I miss my dad so much, and I couldn't say no because my dad is with me. And so he's here, and you're going to hear some of my dad as I talk. So what I want to do is I have a PowerPoint. I'm going to go through the slides pretty quickly. And anybody who knows me knows that I want to get you to think. My goal is to really think. And my dad loved controversy. He loved different sides. So I hope we can get into some, people feel comfortable to kind of speak their mind and really talk about stuff. So he really loves differing opinions. So with that, let me punch up the slide. I see there are a few more people coming in. So, okay, so I'm really talking about, and I did a TEDx on something similar, and this idea of unifying America with Black history and poverty reduction. And I always start with this idea called influence, and so the reality is a lot of my thinking is based on this. And so I was going to write a book on leadership, and there are a million books on leadership, but I thought I had a unique approach. And I'm kind of an etymologist, and I looked up the definitions of leadership, command, and authority, and discovered that the word influence was used in at least one of the definitions for each of those words. And it sent me on this path to really study this word influence, and really discover that it's a word that's hidden in plain sight. And so what I mean by that is they'll say that she's influential or he's influential, and what does it mean? Do they have more social media followers? Are they rich? Are they attractive? Are they powerful? But the reality is we do what we do think the way we think and accomplish what we accomplish because of influence. And some of the influence examples I use are English accents. And some of you have heard me say this before, is that no child is born with an accent. They could be born in London or Brooklyn or Sydney, Australia, or London, England, or wherever. But they develop an accent that so often stays with them the rest of their life. So it's important for us to think about our favorite sports teams, our culture, our religion, who we think is attractive. All of those, our politics, all of those things are really based on influence. And so we often like to think, well, we make our own decisions, and we do to some extent. But the research shows that really about 80% of what we do is influence, 20% is, and I've had some arguments with some of my friends about that, but actually the research is showing that we're mostly products of influence. The other thing, and some of you have heard me say, is that I know what the best music in the world is. And I often ask people, what's the best music? But the research says that the best music for women is actually the ages 14 to 24 and men 15 to 25. And it doesn't mean you don't like other kinds of music, but that's a time in your life when your brain's growing and you first fall in love. And so everybody on this Zoom call has a song or two songs that if it was played right now would take them back. And so part of as we talk about diversity and race, we have to understand that we all have different music. And we would never try to change somebody else's musical taste, but we often try to do their perspective, their political perspective, their racial perspective, and other things. And so it's important for us to really understand that we need to create a symphony by allowing different music, true diversity into the world. And so just as you heard, we talk about my influences. So I'm talking about influences. And so obviously my dad, who knew in March with Dr. King, this is in Boston. He was just recently one of the people honored in the Embrace Monument in Boston. This is my dad, who was marching next to Dr. King at the time. They were arm in arm. And the idea was in Boston to march to integrate the Boston public schools. The old board committee chair, Louise Day Hicks, said, we will never have integration in Boston. And that's what this march was. And so these kinds of things people have heard about, but they don't think of that this still. And so influences people to be racist as well. One of the realities of that I find with this influence model is it helps me suspend judgment, because nobody's born a racist, nobody's born with a different accent, but they're influenced to be racist. And it doesn't mean you excuse it, but you can really try to understand. You can try to understand who they are and why they do what they do. So one of the other things too is that some folks may not be members of the Nazi Party or the KKK, but they're those that feel an inherent right to be superior and that aren't sensitive to other people's issues. Again, those are influence. Those are influence things. And so it's easy to rail against these folks, but we have to begin to really think about the influence that is in America on all sides of it. This group, that those who are a little more enlightened, who are aware of racism and aware of some of the things that happen, we all, and I'm at fault and we're all at fault, that we aren't more proactive about that. One of the things, there's a big debate on whether the monument should be torn down. And one of the things that I say is that all of us, including me, should have spoken up to change the Robert E. Lee Monument to say racist, or to put something on that monument. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a move to tear them down. And I believe that history is history, but we need to tell the truth. We need to celebrate some folks who have been forgotten to history. And we need to really recognize that some people that we think are heroes were in fact not great people. And so it's important to have that dialogue and have that discussion. So one of the things that I say, and the reason I say unifying America with Black and other history, is that America is like a football team. We were blessed, I think, to have the two best football teams in the Super Bowl. Here's the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. And the best football teams have a great defensive back and a great tackle and great running backs and great quarterbacks and wide receivers, who are all very different people. They're of different sizes and different skill sets. And so that's what America is. And we're strong. The football team is strong because each of the players is strong in their own way. And so one of the things we need to understand is we need to celebrate diversity. But instead, what we're doing is we're trying to create teams of Tom Brady, where everybody looks alike, everybody has that same look, everybody is a star. And if Tom Brady were playing every position, it would be the worst football team in history. And so we are so often have to rebel against those people that say, oh, well, you're talking about Black history, that's separating us. No, it's actually strengthening us as a country. So it's important to really think about that. So one of the things too is we often, I see some more people are coming in. We often say, okay, well, I don't make assumptions about people. And so, some people say Black people are this, or Jewish people are this, or Hispanic people are this, or Italians are this, or conservatives are this, or liberals are this, or poor people are that. And so one of the things we have to do is begin to start to check ourselves, because we all do this. We all, like a group or don't like a group, and really begin to stereotype and instead of really kind of seeing who people are. And I'll talk a little more about that a little later. So one of the things that we must do is take pride in celebrating our excellence in diversity. And so one of the things that I've found is I've started a number of halls of fame. And the reason we started halls of fame is there are all sorts of award shows, but you never remember who won the last award. But when you do a hall of fame, whether it's football or basketball or baseball, is that it becomes part of the memory. And one of the things that the realities of our education system is that none of us here have really had a comprehensive history education. No matter where we went, I have some of my Princeton friends here and Harvard friends and others. And the reality is so much of the history has been forgotten. But by making a hall of fame, we want to do that. But the halls of fame should be as diverse as a football team. So one of the things, and Dina Lichtman is here, and I'm going to work with her to do some Jewish halls of fame, and some Italian halls of fame, and Irish halls of fame, and Latino, Indian, Asian, and Black halls of fame. And the idea is that we need to celebrate our excellence, because there are extraordinary people in every one of these communities. They've overcome some odds, different odds, but certain odds. And so one of the things that I started first in 2008 was the Black Tennis Hall of Fame. I had done an exhibit on Black tennis history with the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and 25,000 people saw it at the US Open. So I decided to continue that history, and this has become incredibly popular. And so I said, well, we need to celebrate some more of that history. So we started the Black Entrepreneurs Hall of Fame, the Black Inventors Hall of Fame, the Black Educators Hall of Fame, the Black Executives Hall of Fame, the Black Music Hall of Fame, the Black Authors Hall of Fame. And in Tulsa, in the 100th anniversary of the Race Massacre, we had the Black Entrepreneurs and Black Inventors Halls of Fame. I think Glenn Best, who's the executive director of the Inventors, I don't know if James is here. But what that has done is opened my eyes and other people's eyes to the extraordinary accomplishments that have been there. And so why is that important? It's important for us because there's so many negative images out there, so many images of poverty, so many images of a lot of the bad things that happen, but some extraordinary things have happened. And so just to go quickly through this, VJ Records, and I love saying this, a Black record company was the first to sign the Beatles in America. And the ironing board and the home security system and the 3-light traffic signal and the refrigerated trucks and elevated doors, but the electric microphone, the golf tee, all invented by Black people. The carbon light bulb filament, the color IBM PC monitor, the lawn sprinkler, the natural gas central heating, the clothes dryer, the blood bank, potato chips. And so as you begin to think about all of that stuff, it has been extraordinary. But then you say, okay, well, why are we dealing with so much poverty and dealing with so many things? And this goes back to the influence piece. And so we put together this graphic that every one of us is a product of our influence. We have an inner circle, people who influence us more than others, family and friends. We have a social circle, often work, a community circle, and a global circle. And we're all influenced by that. Unfortunately, fortunately for some who are influenced by highly educated people, wealthy people, they have an advantage over those that are dealing with the legacy of slavery. And those influences, as I said, impact how we are. So often people say, well, why doesn't this community just work harder so they can be successful? Why don't they study harder? Why don't they do that? But we don't understand the role of influences. And I'm going to talk a little more about that. So one of the realities, and I was heading an urban charter school where we had 100%, 95% free and reduced lunch of poverty. And many of the kids had what seemed like it was post-traumatic stress disorder. And their amygdala, the part of the brain, the fight or flight brain, was really out of whack. And it really got me to think about this idea of social influence, that we're influenced socially, how we view things, our favorite sports teams, et cetera. But also there's something in a term I coined called neuroinfluence. And that's when that part of the brain is out of whack. It has nothing to do with how smart you are. But what you find is that many people that are suffering in poverty are, because of crime and abuse and violence and other things, are dealing with an amygdala out of whack. I've sat with gang members and who are in the flight mindset all the time, which is why they can kill people indiscriminately. So this is a crisis in the community. It's not just because people are bad, it's because they've been influenced a certain way. So one of the terms that I coined is urban traumatic stress disorder, UTSD. And so I talk about it in a very well-received article on the classroom, on employment, and in the community. And so as we look at some of the issues in the Black and other communities, we need to begin to really understand why things are happening the way they are. Instead of saying we have white middle-class values, these folks need to just work harder to be successful. One of the other things, if you start to really look at this trauma, you see this pyramid, and we put together this pyramid of frequent traumatic stress, disrupted neurodevelopment, social, emotional, and cognitive difficulties, risky behavior, poor health, and early death. So when we begin to think about this trauma, it's impacting some folks that actually are brilliant, who don't get a chance to share their brilliance because of what they're going through, and it's largely poverty. So one of the things is, as you heard, I will be the next president of Centenary University, and there's a professor there, Tall is started a master's in happiness program and is an expert in post-traumatic growth and happiness studies. And so I'm not going to get into this too much, but if you look at the things that you have to do to deal with some of this trauma relate to spiritual well-being and physical and intellectual, relational, emotional. And Tal Ben is just an extraordinary individual. So we're going to create a Center for Happiness Studies that will incorporate some of these things and address some of the issues related to these urban communities. So then as we go to this idea of the beloved community, Dr. King had borrowed that term from actually a number of different philosophers. And the idea is, this is our vision. Our vision when people have an opportunity to pay their bills, an opportunity not to judge people by who they are, but to celebrate differences. And that's where we're trying to get to when we're trying to do that. But unfortunately, there's some systemic things in society. Just as I said, we should have spoken up about the monuments of Jefferson Davis and all those and said, hey, the writing on that is wrong. We need to change that. We need to begin to right some wrongs in society. And it's not a conservative or liberal thing. When we get into this thing of conservative or liberal, we are distracted from the reality of that neither one is really focusing on these issues. And we as the good people out there need to begin to step up. So one of the realities is this. And so if you look at since 1978 up to 2021, CEO compensation has gone up 1,460%. Worker compensation has gone up 18%. You know, I went to Wharton, I got my MBA. I see Serge is here, he's the fellow Wharton MBA, and my friend Duncan went to Harvard. I have no problem with CEO compensation, but it shouldn't be, the worker compensation should go up equally. You know, where are the voices out there talking about the disparity and the middle class is disappearing? So we who are out there have to speak up. We have to not sit on our dust and just say, well, we can't change the system. It is what it is. We need to begin to think about things. And this next slide is the thing that really angers me more than just about anything else in America. And this is a crime, that they have not increased the poverty rate, Democrats or Republicans, that in order to be considered poor with 5 people in your household, you have to make less than $27,000 a year. And where are the voices speaking up to say, and what this does, it disproportionately impacts people who are the legacy of slavery, who are dealing with the regular thing. So that's why there's so much poverty, dealing with trauma, dealing with this ridiculous kind of thing. And yet we're not holding anybody accountable to say we need to raise it. And so I follow something called the MIT Living Wage Calculator, which basically says a family of 4 needs to make over $65,000. If they make less than that, they're actually poor, meaning that they can't pay their bills. And so we as leaders in society need to begin to speak up. It's great to complain about all the bad things. We've got to lead and do something about that. And then I'll finish up soon. And one of the things, as some of you know, I started these things called entrepreneur zones. And I was driven to do that and wrote an article because the opportunity zone legislation that came out of the Trump administration basically says real estate developers that go into urban communities get tax breaks to do that. And it sounds great. But what's happening is that they're gentrifying, they're pushing out all the poor people, they're pushing out a lot of the businesses of color, and they're pushing out a lot of the job opportunities. And so I said, what we need to do instead of opportunity zones are create entrepreneur zones, where we help to keep people there by growing these clusters of businesses and using the Small Business Development Center to really do that. Come on. And then finally, one of the things that we need to begin to do is really look at the iceberg. We know that most of the iceberg is below the waterline. We need to really, instead of looking at what we see, so we see poverty, we see people who are poor, we see people in prison, yet we don't take time to understand their influences and why they're in prison and what they've dealt with. And so as we talk about race, it's important for all of us to begin to really look at the whole person and really stop making assumptions. And so I'm going to end with this. This is I've used in a number of presentations that it looks like that says what? Ice cream is good. But that's the surface. But you take it down, you see that's what it says. And so as we begin, and that's so often what we do with people, especially people of color. So with that, and I wanted to go through this quickly because I want to tee up some conversations. And like my dad, we always put people to task that we have a lot more to do in society around these things. And so I'd love to hear some questions. I'd love to hear some dialogue. I'm not the all-knowing expert, but I really want us to begin to, my hope is to feel some responsibility for how we move this country forward towards that beloved community. So with that, any questions, comments?
Dr. Caldwell, this is Cleve. How are you?
Hey, Cleve, how you doing?
Very good. What
Atlanta.
an extraordinary presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Well, thank
As
you.
I always do, listening to you talk, you provide such great wisdom and insight. And you really do have a call of action, which is wonderful. One of the things that came to my mind as you were speaking was we need to do more to dismantle the structures that create barriers which limit access to influence.
Yes.
It is so vital to Black economic development. I'd like to hear some discussion around that.
Well, first, Cleve, why don't you tell them the show that you've been doing?
Okay, yeah.
Which fits right in.
Under Dr. Caldwell's direction and leadership, we created a show called Between Two Shades, Uncovering the Gray Optic. The intent of the show is to have dialogue like this about race and have real conversations about it, not just theoretical conversations, but conversations that move people toward action, to begin to recognize how perceptual filters that promote bias in society can be dismantled.
An example, Cleve, and one of the first shows that he talked about is here in Jersey at the mall. And some of you will remember where there's a young white kid and a Black kid. And the cops thought they stole something, and they sat the white kid down and they threw the Black kid to the ground and handcuffed him.
Mm-hmm.
And so those kinds of things are what we, and good people can't just sit by and say, oh, he must have done something worse. We need to intervene, and we need to really step up. And so thank you, Cleve.
Absolutely. Yeah, implicit bias of that type that can result in damaging or potentially, as we've seen series of many times already, the loss of life of people. But that show and that particular episode was to begin to look at or kind of unpack what's going on below the surface. A lot of times our filters, our perceptual filters, are influenced by, again, our social way we've been socialized, the people we've been around, and our own personal bias that makes it difficult for us to begin to see outside of that reality.
Absolutely. Mark, you had a question? Mark from New York City.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
Hey, Dale. I knew Dale at Princeton, and I had the great privilege of attending one of his services as a pastor last summer, and it made me think about a question about what is religion's role in this discussion, because religion is a chance not only for people to think about moral questions, but also to socialize as well. And yet religion does seem to be one of the more segregated parts of American life. That I'm Jewish myself, so that is it's obviously very it's all Jewish people. And then I've been to some church services, and usually I don't see a lot of integrated congregations. And I'm just wondering, what is the role of religion in improving the discussion and the dialogue about race?
Great question, Mark. And Mark came, and Mark's an extraordinary author and scientist, and I talked about science and religion when he came. But one of the things I've learned, so I've been a pastor for about 1.5 years, and so one of the things that I learned, and actually I preached on this on Sunday, about the difference between the punishment gospel and the prosperity gospel. And there's a punishment gospel that says if you do something wrong, you're going to hell. And they kind of keep members, they scare people off by doing that. The prosperity gospel says, well, you're better than other people if you come to my church. And both of those are very exclusionary. And so what we need to do, and what I've learned is the real gospel, and again, it's if you look at Jesus's greatest commandments are really two. Love God with your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so it really simplifies the fact that if you're not loving I don't care how saved you think you are, if you're not loving your neighbor as yourself, then you really aren't following the gospel. And so one of the things that we need to call even the church to task is more than 50% of the world is poor and struggling, yet there are all sorts of, God didn't create denominations or religions, men did. And so we need to begin, and I'm saying we all need to hold ourselves accountable to say, how do we let so many people suffer while we're sitting in a church, or while we're sitting in our living room, or while we're sitting in a great job? And I think, we don't need to feel guilty about that, but we need to move forward. So Mark, the church needs to do more, and the church needs to be open. And what we have Minister Charles, who's just joined the church and really helping me. We're reaching out to people. We do have a diverse, not as diverse as we'd like, but a diverse congregation, but we're really trying to reach out to all people. And one of the things that we do is that anyone can take communion. There's certain denominations you can't take communion. And so it's part of making people feel welcome, but also not judging people. And one of the challenges of churches is that they forget that God is the only judge, and that they're judging those other folks. And so we've made a non-judgmental zone in that church. Now, when I'm perfect, I'm going to judge all of you, but I ain't going to be perfect this life. So we need to be honest about that. So Mark, it's a great question, but I think churches have not done, and my hope is we can begin to inspire churches to be more inclusive and to be more focused on loving their neighbor as self.
Yes,
Well,
thank you so
Dale.
much.
That's great.
Go
Claire,
ahead. There was a question from
Al.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Dr. Caldwell, I love your enthusiasm. I think it's catching and it goes. But one of the things I guess I want to see, you say we should, we can, if you were to say we, America, can do this, there's some presidential candidate who says, we don't want to be woke. So when you say we should do, he's saying we should not do. So who's we? How do we get we? If you say America, of course, there's a big divide. It's not going to be everybody trying to do that. So how do you do that when you have, I guess people in power and influence, with a lot of influence, who are saying, we don't want that.
That's a great question. That's a great question. But I have, and I'm sure you have, I've seen those that have gone from that exclusionary. I've seen folks that were racist that woke up for some reason, that grew up influence. And there's an influence equation. And so the idea of the influence equation is that everyone, their influence can change, but it has to be so intense to change them. One of the things and so I don't give up on anybody. And again, that's in the gospel too, that I don't give up on everybody, that there's good, and my dad believed this very much. There is good in everybody's soul. And what you have to do is kind of clear out the bad. And I think part of it is, we want to hate and hate those that have hurt other people. And just think about the Jewish experience and the Black experience and others, and that I mean, if we took hate, there's probably not a company that we could probably patronize in America that's been around, for 200 years. If you look, and so we need to begin to learn how to forgive and inspire. And so I really say we, because I have not given up on folks. And then once you really internalize this influence thing, you start to realize that people do things only for influence reasons. And that if they think they're going to get money or they're going to get power or that they're convinced that the other people are bad. You know, I looked at those people during the Obama administration who were sitting in a trailer with no health care, who are saying, I don't want health care from that black guy.
Mm.
And even against their own self-interest. And at some point, some of those folks wake up and said, what? I need health care. So as I said, I mean, I really think I'm more hopeful that we as a country, that I really believe good wins in the end. Not
Yeah, I
everybody
agree.
believes that. I really believe good wins in the end. And I think part of the problem, and I meant to get Dr. King's quote. He said, the problem is not all the bad people. The problem is the good people that don't do anything. That's what my motivation today is, to say we are the good people. We need to begin to speak up for what, and I use those statues that have been torn down. A lot of people say that's wrong to tear down that history. Well, we should have spoken up and said something about what making Jefferson Davis, you know, a hero. So Mike Rush has a question now.
Yes. A couple of questions, real quick. Thank you. First of all, Dale, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad you invited me, so thank you. I appreciate what you're doing and what you have done over the years since you and I met. But let's go back to religion for one moment. There are a lot of questions about the color of Jesus. Okay, so when we talk about civilization and the beginning of civilization, and we know that civilization began in Africa, why is it that when I go to several churches, especially the churches with African-American ministers or pastors, why is it Jesus still white in their building? I'm concerned. I know the answer, but I think that's something. And the other answer, and then I'll stop. The other issue is talking about critical race theory. In our school system, that's a real across the country, especially in places like Florida and Texas. We don't erase it. So those are the two concerns I have. And thank you for allowing me to say that.
No, Mike, great. That's great. Remember the influence thing. And I hope if you don't remember anything, just think about the influence thing. I don't think we understand how pervasive it is. We, you know, folks in black churches grew up thinking Jesus is blonde and blue-eyed.
Right.
And as much as, you know, the cops in Memphis, think about that. They look down on black people the way white people, they were influenced to think those people are bad the way white people did. They treated them like they were the Klan. And so once you begin to really separate yourself from the influence to realize how much we're influenced to think a certain way, we begin to break things down. So that's the reason why you will see so many people of color and not of color doing what they do, which doesn't make any sense. It's because they've been influenced that way. The second thing about critical race theory is the reality is that and one of the things I would have preferred is to say, teach real American history. Right. That you should teach real American history. You don't put a name on it. The Tulsa race, you know, again, we did the induction ceremony for the Black inventors and Black entrepreneurs on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacre. For 90 of those years, it was a race riot, as if the Black people got upset and they did that. And it was only recently that they made it a race massacre. There's nobody on this call who went to great schools that was taught that. Some of those names that, and when I start to tell people all these other things that have been accomplished, you say, well, why is that important? Well, it's important because it balances out the influence. You know, I grew up watching, and this is where I love my friends from the Caribbean and Africa, because they've grown up seeing Black people do anything. They have no doubt. There's a reason why most of the successful Black people come from the Caribbean and Africa, because they have no doubt they can do anything they want to do. We've been beaten down in generation after generation. I was just watching the show with Henry Louis Gates, you know, his ancestry show, and John Johnson, the former Homeland Security chair under Obama, was there. And he went and does a great, and he found that his fourth grandfather had two families, a white family and a Black family. And the Black family was his slave family. So he actually fathered 5 kids with the slave family. And so he had a white family as well. And he actually ended up leaving some money to the slave family. But think about the mindset and the influence. And part of the thing I even said on Sunday, part of the problem is people don't feel the history. I really kind of beat up folks that use the N-word. You know, and so many folks are using the N-word and they have no sense how painful that N-word is to generations of folks. And they say, well, I use an AZ at the end, so that makes it okay. No, it doesn't. And we've done a bad job of helping people, white and black and Asian and Jewish, feel that history. I mean, I think one of the things, and Dina can talk, is that, and I admire about many Jewish folks, is they feel their history. There's a connection to that. And I think we've lost that because it has been taught in school to really feel the pain of that. Just think, I was in Memphis I was in Montgomery doing some work with the school board there. And then on that street, they had, this is where slaves were sold on the main street there. That had a profound effect on me. Just to think, walking down this street, folks were being chained and separated. Just think about separated from their kids, from their wife, from their husband, from their loved ones. We don't deal with that enough so that all people realize how that can be traumatic through generations. And it's not an excuse. Some people, well, it's an excuse. Slavery was over. You know, Obama was president. We're in a post-racial period. Why are you worrying about that stuff? Well, you've worried about it because economically them things. So one of the other things that really has been detrimental after slavery was, one, that, you know, after slavery, they would lock people up and then basically put them back in chains. But two, you know, during the housing boom in America, because of redlining, white families were able to develop the quickest form of wealth, which is real estate, and black families were denied that. And yet we don't talk as much about that as to why there's an economic disparity. So again, all of these things, and I'm not a big believer in beating people up for the past. I'm a big believer in just telling the truth and really understanding how do we move forward, dealing with trauma, dealing with economic disparity, dealing with some of the measures going forward. And I think we can do it, and we can do it in a humane way, in a way that people aren't hurt. I really believe that. I really believe that.
Thank you so much. We have two other people that had questions. One was Valerie Drew, who put something in the chat about a YouTube. And then after that, Shashila Raghavan has a question. Is Valerie Drew here?
Yeah, thank you for that very much, Claire.
You're welcome. Yes.
It's not so much a question, Dr. Caldwell, as it is just sharing. I think the link in YouTube actually talks about how banks were actually paid back for the money that they lost during slavery, and how the slave owners were actually given restitution when they actually lost their slaves, as opposed to those slaves who were actually enslaved. So I think if you look at that link and if you listen to that video, I think it will definitely add a lot of insight to what Dr. Caldwell was just describing.
Well, thank you, Valerie. And Valerie is related to Charles Drew, the legendary. And so, but that's the history, the truth. We need to really, and very few people know the truth. And I think if we really had the truth, real American history, then people would realize, whoa, it's amazing that these folks have had so many inventions that they've had. So someone else have a question?
I
have a question.
Yeah, Shashila Raghavan.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Caldwell. Oh my God, it was amazing listening to you. And it just, there are a lot of things that was going on in my mind listening to you. When you talked about stereotyping occurring, and not because, we don't have the awareness of other races, and how influence impacts how we become and who we become, and also the cultural unconscious biasness and celebrating each other's differences. But if I may be honest, I feel, listening, I think it's amazing. We talk, it just seems to me we are talking about black and white here. I think there are so many in between cultural races and backgrounds that we are not addressing. And I think I've seen this in schools where my daughter has been, school. And I see so much of issues, not just And she's also mixed. And then she seeing the differences, Asians, East Asians, South Asians, Caribbeans. I mean, there's no talk about this. I mean, the way I was trying to do it through foods, the Black kids, not aware of at all what the Asian kids eat. And Asian, again, is a big group, a tremendous big group. And how the Hispanics, not aware of what the Chinese eat. So to me, bringing the small way that I could and educating them from a very young age about those. So the cultural differences are so important. And I think to me, it's not just black and white, even churches and, and so I'm asking, how do we try to go about this, and,
That's a great question. And I actually noticed something. There was an event at FDU that had cannabis. It was the cannabis industry. And so, it was really almost, it was all white. And the cannabis industry had been, because a lot of people are against it, had been kind of hurt by politics and other things. And instead of rallying together, they were biting each other. They were fighting each other. And so what happens is groups that are subjugated actually end up turning, fighting each other.
Yes.
And people say, well, there's a plan to put people of color down. There's a plan. People don't have to do a plan because people are doing it on their own. And so part of the reason that I want to celebrate Halls of Fame is to really celebrate excellence of all communities. I mean, the Irish had their problems, and the Italian had their problems, and folks that were Indian and Asian and Latino and Black. And I think we need to really celebrate excellence together.
Yeah.
And when we do that, then all of a sudden it's not, well, we're better than you. There are all sorts of stories about people, poor whites, hurting Blacks because they just want to be better than somebody.
So how do we, I'm talking about some form of, I'm asking for some help. How do we on this panel, talking about race, how do we incorporate such a concept, instead of just, yes, slavery and the talking about that is very important, but I'm saying, how do we talk about the other immigrants? The Hispanics, the Asians.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what we want to do is begin to celebrate the excellence of each of those groups together and have a dialogue with kids to talk about the excellence. Who was the first, the first Latino to do X, or the Irish or Italian. And it's important to have that dialogue because people don't know. And people buy into the Tom Brady view of the world, that there's one America. Don't talk about anybody else. There's just one America, one language, one accent. One this and that kills this country.
Yeah, it does, and it does also not just in schools. I think not just kids. I think adults badly need it, if you ask me. And so how do we begin that in other areas?
We don't celebrate our differences. We use them to divide us, and until we really do, we're all different, and we learn from one another. And until we hear each other's stories and listen to one another and not celebrate one another, then there can only be this divisiveness. So when you say we, I've heard many people say, oh, I'm so tired. Like, honestly, with your dad one time, I'm thinking, how can this man still have this vigor to fight this fight? Like, it's exhausting. And sometimes you don't want to, educate others. And it's tough. But if we don't, what do we have?
But Ms. Sykes is wants to, but let me answer that. So one of the things that my dad and I've inherited this is that we're not going to change everybody. But we really work with those that want to buy into it. Not everybody in this call is going to believe what I'm saying, but there's some who are going to think differently, and we'll carry them along. And that's what my dad lived for, is those that and that kept you going. The old starfish thing, that there are a million starfish on the beach, and they're walking down, and the guy picks it up and throws one in. He said, That's not going to make a difference. He says, but it does to that one. And that's what you look for. And so, Ms. Sykes.
Dr. Caldwell.
Yeah.
Mark Scotland. How are you?
Mark, I think Beatty Sykes is next.
I think,
And so Mark,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I find your discussion very interesting, and I have a few comments. One thing that I need to hear a lot more about is Native Americans.
Yeah.
We white people came in, we took their bloody their country, their land away, we destroyed them, and we acted like the immigrants, right? We were the immigrants. The other thing I would like to hear much more than churches. I'm talking about other religions, including non-religion. I'm an atheist. We are so out of it. I don't even tell my neighbors because they won't talk to me because I'm not part of the main. And black people go into the Christianity where that was not their original religion either in West Africa. Okay, so that's an issue. And the other thing is, since you talked about or would like to change the poverty situation, are you working together with Reverend Dr. William Barber? You know whom I'm talking about?
But my dad knew.
William Barber,
Yeah.
the third. Okay, because he started the Moral Mondays, and he brings all people of all colors, of all ages, rich and poor, gay and non-gay, Christian, all the other, not just Christians. He brings everybody together, and he actually, somebody had asked earlier what we actually can do. Get the book and read the Third Reconstruction and support Dr. Reverend Barber, because he's an MLG to me.
Well, and my dad knew him, and he's doing amazing work. So let me answer two questions. So one, within my church, I'm inviting agnostic, atheist, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu to my church, and this is, God, again, that's what churches are for. It's for bringing people together. So that one is it's a big tent. Again, if you have the mindset that God is the only judge, you're much more open to people.
Well, I even believe there is no God,
Or you believe that the universe is the judge, whatever you believe. But I can't judge you. I can't say that. Now, the other piece, William Barber is doing amazing things, but this is what we have to do. And I've had this, that there are two sides with capitalism in America. And people are really missing it, is that there's plutocratic capitalism, which we have now. There's democratic capitalism, and there's socialism. Plutocratic capitalism and socialism do not work. Do not work. In fact, plutocratic capitalism is really socialism, because big companies are controlling government. They're controlling everything. That's why the salaries went up. But democratic capitalism, which means entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs being given the same level of opportunity. I mean, they built this country. 84% of the world's businesses are family businesses. So the other thing we have to do, if we're serious about this, is to begin to patronize small businesses, to begin to fight for small, because what happens is neither the Democrats or the Republicans, because small businesses don't have money to pay lobbyists, they ignore them. And so what we need to do is really begin to really understand that if small businesses disappear, I mean, antitrust laws seem to have disappeared, which is killing people. I mean, it's really horrible. Quarterly reporting and other things. But to support entrepreneurs, that's real capitalism. And so when people say socialism, no, capitalism, because people want to develop their own. They want to grow. They want to work for something. And I've spent a lot of time in the public, private, nonprofit sector. The best companies to work for are family businesses. They're better than nonprofits. They're better than government. They're better than big corporations. I was talking to one today. They will pay, not in their contract, the funeral services for folks. They'll pay for kids to go to college. They will do all sorts of things because they can't afford to lose the employees. They treat customers better. So we and William Barber, I'm hoping, and I'm going to try to push him on this entrepreneur zone. They got to do more for entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I feel that very strongly. And it's just very, very clear to me that if we don't support the entrepreneurial base in this country, we're going to continue to have a disappearing middle class, and our economy is going to go in the tank. You're either going to have a lot of money or no money.
You know, there's another book by Sherrod Whitehouse, one of the senators from Rhode Island. He wrote a book called Captured. America is definitely no longer a democracy. It's a plutocracy.
It's plutocracy, yeah.
It is corporation that owns the government, period.
Yeah.
There's no issue.
And
It's a revolving door. The lobbyists go in, they're in the government, get their connections, then they become lobbyists.
yeah.
It's
And
as simple as
it's not
that.
about party. It's not about party.
No,
Mark,
it's not a party. They all do it.
No, but Mark, you wanted to say something? And then Mike?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Dale, first of all, I'm on this call for therapeutic reasons, and I want to thank Glenn Best for alerting me to this event. First of all, I love my ethnicity as a Black person, and learning and hearing about history is important to me as being the first in certain areas. We're the first ever company, Black company, to be in the automotive diagnostic scan tool space. We're the first to ever develop remote technologies related to vehicles that help clean the environment and otherwise. And and we work very closely with the Environmental Protection Agency, the California regulators. They've acknowledged all of this. The reason I mention this is in spite of all of those, it's still extraordinarily difficult as a small company to not only get funded, but attract the resources that we need. And recently, we've been approached by a major automaker who wants to integrate our solution into their system. And I can go on with some other companies who are looking for this. So I say that only to say, as much as I'm over the top enthusiastic about my ethnicity, more importantly is what we're doing that transcends race and has to do with the ability to save money, to improve efficiencies, and to help address the environmental issues that we are currently facing now. So I just wanted to say, it's really helpful for me to hear this because it inspires me to keep going against extraordinary odds of us succeeding.
Well, let me tell to support that, and this is part of the. So people say, okay, Dale, you went to Princeton and Wharton, and you must be you're doing okay. You're the first Black president, so look, you made it. But one of the realities is, so my announcement went out last week that I'm the president, and you don't know how many people the president, the chair of the board got that, oh, it's woke, you're hiring this guy because he's Black. And you look at my resume versus the resume of the other folks, and it had nothing to do with being Black. And so I was one of the narrators of a movie on Richard Williams, a documentary on Richard Williams, which should come out probably later this year. And one of the things that really hit home in that documentary is that it doesn't matter. And this is where people need to really understand. People think, okay, well, you've made a lot of money. You're the best in the world. People are going to respect you. The Williams sisters were the best in the world. And they were called all sorts of racist terms. And they were the best in the world, without question, the best in the world. And when you see this documentary, it'll show you what happens in America, even if you are extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And I think we and my friends who think that, well, everybody has an equal chance to make it, and it's, some people are lazy, need to understand the realities of that. But again, I don't get angry about it as much because it's influence. People are influenced to think, and this is why I'm so much for the halls of fame, that Black people are less. You got into Princeton because you're Black. You got into Wharton because you're Black. Everything I do is because I'm Black. I was the first Black senior manager. And so when you start, really hearing people that's their excuse, you need to begin to really understand. And that's why I want the Black halls of fame, because I want people to know that there's so many excellent people out there, even with one hand tied behind their back. So they realize that I'm not the exception. Mark's not the exception. Mike Rush is not the exception. You know, Tiger Woods is not the exception. And so I think that's why I think we need to really, 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 really let people know that how extraordinary people are from every community. Mike Rush, you were going to say something. I see you chopping at the bit. You're on mute. Mike.
And then Glenn Beck has something after. Glenn Best, I think.
Oh, Glenn, okay.
First of all, well, Dale, you're doing a fantastic job, so thank you. And my concern is that, and I want to see how many people on this panel know what happened to the National Football League, and things changed in 2021. Had to do with Black athletes. When the NFL started, African American who got injured with a head, they were not given the same treatment as white because the NFL felt that Black folk were inferior. Now that was the NFL, and it only changed in 2021. So those are the issues when we talk about that. Now I'll just go right quick into, Dr. Caldwell, you mentioned critical race theory. I'm a retired educator. I'm going to Ocean County next week to two schools, one where I was principal and another school where they're having severe problems with critical race theory because parents and some of the people feel that if you teach about Black history, white kids, parents of white kids are saying that my child doesn't need to hear that because he didn't start that. So that's a big issue we have around our country. Now, if you look at the number of schools who are having, in New Jersey, by the way, who are having racial issues, it's astronomical. So something has to be done. I just wanted to get that out there. Yeah. And by the way, before I leave, you know, I'm glad you're in Red Bank because I was superintendent in Red Bank. I was the first African-American superintendent at Red Bank Borough Schools in 1996.
Oh,
okay.
Wow. Hi.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you. So Glenn Best has a comment. Is he still here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm gonna just how's everyone? First, great to see everyone. Dale, wonderful job as always. And I put a little something in the chat because it speaks to a little bit to some of the questions around religion and how we have these conversations. My friend Donald Butler, who's a retired police officer from New York, he's also a pastor. And he has this group on Facebook that they have these open dialogues with anyone, but it's mostly both current and active and retired police officers. And they actually have dialogues of this exact same conversation we're having here. They have those kind of conversations. It's white, Black, Asian, Hispanic officers, and they're having real conversations with each other and people who join the conversation, and they challenge each other on these biases because many of these biases are not recognized by us internally, and we all have it. And I think, and so I shared that because everyone was asking, what can we do? How do we? Yes.
Could I just ask you, that really might be a great program. So if you can, I can email you and maybe follow through with that. That would be, you know, we've done police brutality, racism and policing but I think that could be a great program. So
Absolutely.
if that's
absolutely.
okay, I'd like to.
Oh yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I just wanted to cite that because we were talking about some of this, and as we talk about policing and the things and understanding cultural, how we cultural differences, and I heard about the nuances of cultural differences. And there are many. And they impact everything that happens within all of these organizations, all of these agencies, all of these businesses. Mark's struggle to break through in his space.
Difference is with police, they carry guns. And you know, wherever we are, whatever we do, we're all different. But police have guns, and so it's, you know, we're a whole different level. when we're talking about this. So
So we have
anyway,
Robert, Patricia, and then Serge.
okay.
Thank you.
And Robert Bennett,
Thank you, Glenn.
and then
Thank you.
Patty.
Robert?
Hey, I'm
Yes.
here.
Hey.
Dale, as always, you're all on point. I don't say controversy, you create conversation.
Thanks.
I'm listening to everyone and their responses, but this is the first time in 250 years in this country when we had an industrial revolution, there's an even playing field. But the playing field is not even until we educate the people in the community about the opportunities that exist. We need to stop generating individual silos in our communities with information that predicate us to be able to go out and do the things that we do. The work that Dale's doing, especially Glenn Best and the great things that you're doing up there in New Jersey, with tying and creating the bridge and the pipeline for the next generation to be able to have access to opportunities in the new jobs that are taking over since COVID. There's a paradigm shift in this industry a lot of people don't know. That all the jobs that were once available through small business is changing. There's a movement around the country called innovation development hubs. They're being built everywhere. And these hubs are basically incubators for new businesses in the technology field to move cities into the next 20 years of what they're going to look like. And my point I'm making is we need to look at the opportunities and open up the door, and that healing is going to take place when people are able to get a living wage, be educated, take the letters off the back of our names that we've earned, and just be able to have open conversations with folks. Because a lot of people out here in this, I have conversations all over this country about technology, EV charging stations, all this infrastructure bill, and the money that is out there, but they don't have the workers to do the work. And then you also have the businesses. Dale, you'll love this. Electrician who's building in the commercial space who may have only done $500,000 last year can do $5 million in the EV space because of that certification and that credential that he has as a journeyman electrician. You go from 500,000 to 5 million. This is what we have in our country right now, these opportunities. And so the question I have is, what can we do to remove the barriers of information? And what can we do as provide as a platform to get the information out? Not only just on the education of our history, but our accomplishments and the opportunities. What is that?
Great question, Robert. And anybody knows Robert, I mean, this is his passion is really getting this out. You know, the thing, Robert, and this is what we're going to do with Centenary, I'm hoping, is this idea of post-traumatic growth. And that so many folks aren't ready to hear that message. They're not ready to work. And it's not because they're not smart. It's not because they're not driven, but they're dealing with some real issues. And the good news is we can work through those issues with the right approach. But then combine that with the job opportunities you're talking about, the entrepreneurial opportunities you're talking about. But I think we need to pay more attention to the emotional state, one, of this country, but also the emotional state of folks who are descendants of slaves. And you start to see how it's passed down. When you understand influence, you really start to see how that is really everything. And people break through the people say, well, so-and-so in Harlem became a millionaire because they did that. Well, they had people that influenced them to do the right thing. Nobody has ever done it alone. One of the dumbest things I've ever heard is I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. Nobody's ever done that. Even Jesus didn't do it. So we need to begin to wake up and realize it's all about influence. But for the grace of God, I had great parents that made me study, that made me do well in school and get to go to great schools. I could be homeless on the street with the wrong influences. So we, as you're building that out, Robert, working with nonprofits, really helping young people develop that emotional and the emotional resilience is what you know, what Tal's talking about. And that's the key to getting folks through. So that's a great question. I know we had Patty, you wanted to say something?
Oh, yes, thank you. This is really a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm thinking of your dad the whole time. I just wanted to respond actually to what Glenn was saying about the group out of New York City, the Facebook chat group that they have, and how that's exactly what we're trying to do with this program. I'm one of the volunteers for this program with the Red Bank Library, along with Claire and Linda. And what I guess I wanted to say is to encourage everybody here to think about doing something like this in your community. And we're still doing it on Zoom because we started during the pandemic. We're hoping to become live again, but there's really no substitute for having these intimate, open conversations in your community. This certainly is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm really was glad to hear Robert Bennett use the word healing, because there's a tremendous amount of healing, but none of that can happen until we all spend time together. And that's really all I wanted to say. And thank you all. I see folks have been joining from around the country. So thanks for inviting them all, Dale, and thanks for coming.
Great, good, Patty, and part of it is, and I hope I'm trying to model this idea of kind of a non-judgmental discussion. I think a lot of folks and a lot of my friends who aren't Black, you know, sometimes don't want to enter in this conversation because they're you know, people are going to say, well, your ancestors did this and your ancestors did that, and the reality is that it's about moving forward together. It's about celebrating excellence. It's about we're in this together, but also holding us all accountable for speaking up when we see things that are wrong. I mean, that listing of poverty, everyone in America, I don't care if you're conservative or liberal, that listing of how much you need to make to be poor is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a crime. We're the richest country in the history of the world. And for anybody to allow that, and then you know there's something wrong, because what they do, and Mike knows this, in schools, they say, well, 150% of poverty. Well, you know, 200% of poverty. Raise the rate. Don't say 200%, but nobody's calling for that. And what that would do for people is more than a lot of the public policies that Democrats and Republicans and independents are pushing out there. Yeah. And it would strengthen this country. So we've got to speak up. We can't let those things happen.
And if I could just say there, I have actually a list of books I want to put out there tonight. I'll have to email it to everyone, but there is an incredible book. It's by Andrea Elliott. It's called Invisible Child, Poverty, Survival and Hope in an American City. She wrote it about New York City. She follows a family around. I mean, homelessness is so growing in our country, and it is everywhere. But I have a son that lives in Colorado, and Colorado's in a valley in Boulder, and what you see has happened to Boulder with homelessness and addiction, and it's just everywhere. And like what you said before, through the luck of God, you were given your parents, Dale, but it would be, you know, it could just be just as easy to be on the streets. I mean, people in New York City, the homelessness problems, it's such a vast problem. And it's not like you don't have some people really trying to make it better. It's just such a mess. And you know, this is something that is just growing.
Yeah. Al has his hand up. Al?
Yeah, Dale, I know you said you don't give up, you know, you don't like to give up on anybody and so on, but do you see and do you feel honestly that things are getting better, or are they getting worse?
Well, let me pull out. So I've been a management consultant for 20 years. Let me tell you. So what happens in organizations? There's actually a cycle in organizations where they form, then they storm, and then they norm, and they perform. And what I think happened in this country is that when Barack Obama was elected, It was a new country. There are people that are still angry about that. There are people that are still celebrating about that. I watch Becoming on Netflix, and there's so many older African Americans that sit with Michelle, who was my classmate, one of our classmates at Princeton. And so we're in a period where the election of Barack Obama was wonderful for so many people. It was a nightmare for so many people. So we formed that country. We're storming now. A lot of it has to do with the Black president. And some people like Trump have taken advantage of it. They've used that to say, we don't ever want this to happen again. This isn't America. And but what happens with organizations, that's a natural part of starting to norm. So what you're going to start to see, you're going to see people realize this. I'm starting to even see small businesses are more important. People are realizing we've got to do more for small businesses. There's some grant programs that are out there. I just saw one about technology, innovation technology. It's actually a lot of money out there. And then you start performing. So everything goes in a cycle. And so when you start to see this, I really think we're going through this, and you're going to start to see. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't, Biden and Trump are older, and I think we're going to start to see some on both sides, some young people coming after Biden. I think he'll win the next election and he'll retire. But I think we need to really, but it's also up to us. Human beings have never had more political power than we have right now. Because social media, we can, but we're not using it. And so my mom is 87. She has Alzheimer's. She's here, and we'll switch back just to see from MSNBC. Every now and then we'll watch Fox, and they're both giving the same message: vote for my guy, and they're going to solve your problems. Well, they ain't going to solve the problems. And as you said, it's local too. So part of my message today is that we, as caring human beings, need to step up. We need to challenge racism, even within our own community, like those cops. We need to begin to really say what makes sense. Let's think about how complicit we are with that, with the poverty rate. And I did in my dissertation, actually, the poverty rate actually was developed by a woman who used it for food security. She said this should never be used for the poverty rate. Yet they've used it since 1964. So anyway, Mike Rush.
Yeah, real quick. Let's get back to education, because the future will change when we educate our kids differently. And I'm glad you mentioned entrepreneurship. But what we need in our schools, especially urban schools, we need more teachers who look like the students. And that's a big issue. If you were an educator, I've been an educator for 40 years. And I've seen around the country what has happened to the number of African Americans, and that's because of the salaries. Teachers are the lowest paid individuals with a BS degree or master's in the entire country. And something has to happen. And it's programs like you guys and all of us can either say, let's talk about the average teacher salary in each state being no less than $70,000 a year. So that when we change things, so we have to change the way we look at those kids from growing up. My doctorate is in early childhood education in Toms River, New Jersey, where I was principal. Okay, I went to Red Bank, New Jersey, and made a difference in 1996 to 2003. So what I'm saying is, teachers don't make enough money, so you get the people who need to be there. So somehow, hopefully, you can come out of all of these sessions, and I'm going to try to attend each of them. We can talk to our senators, congressmen about raising the national teacher salary.
Yep. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
I would like to say something. Yeah. No, there's someone there who brought out the Native American.
Yeah, right.
Not much we know. Now, when I first moved here, I moved here to Red Bank about 5-6 months ago. And sorry, Linda, I know you're doing a great job, but I just want to talk my experience, what I had with the library. Now, libraries are places of education, very important. So anyway, I took this, the walk that was around Red Bank, and my perception of that was, to me, I wanted to hear more about the Native Americans because I thought they've done a lot in this area. But to me, the focus of the book was all about, about Eisner, whatever he did for Red Bank, the European, whoever was Jewish or someone. And that was fine. But there was nothing, no pictures, nothing on the Native Americans or much on Hispanics. I had to, we had to keep asking questions. So people who come to Red Bank or from Red Bank, the perception of just being white, it's almost like there was no history of the Hispanics, no history of the especially the Lenapes. I mean, I wanted to learn more about them. There was nothing in the literature on the book that was shown to us. So I'm saying, how can the libraries, I mean, they are the centers of learning and centers of education. How can we improve on this to try to, the diversity, historically of this place, can that be improved?
Well, I think that's a great point. I think actually the bottom line is that that particular tour came about our 85th anniversary, and because we're the Eisner Library, that land was deeded to the library by the Eisner family. That's why we have it. So it was dedicated to the Eisner family and what they've done in Red Bank. But honestly, for me, living in Monmouth County, I live in a very white town. Red Bank is one of the great gems of Monmouth County because there is diversity. There is history. I mean, with many cultural groups. I think that's what it gives Red Bank. It's
that's why I came here.
It is something certainly to explore, to be quite honest with you. Like a lot of things are done through volunteers, but I think it's something they're going to be celebrating their 100th anniversary in the next couple of years. So I think maybe a good outcome of that anniversary could be we present a tour that shows many different facets of the cultural environment.
One of the things you can do, and 60 Minutes talked about this, is have people tell their story.
Tell your story. We've done oral histories, but really do.
Real oral history, right?
But really,
we've had programs.
Yeah, we had, and it's actually, when I first came to Red Bank, there was quite a Black community, and then the Latinos moved into Red Bank. The tracks really separate Red Bank, but there was like really hatred between the Blacks and the Latinos over money, because Latinos were working for less than the Black community, and a lot of the Black community left Red Bank. So, I mean, there's so many conversations.
We should do a video history. So what we need to do is a video, and that's what this woman did.
Yeah,
and part of the National Archives. A video history as part of the anniversary. And again, I mean, so Sheila, I'm sorry I didn't answer your. So I'm part the Lumbee Indian, and so I found the Caldwell plantation in Guilford County, North Carolina, and all the Caldwells are from there. And so David Caldwell, who founded this, it was the schools. There's several governors that came there. James Caldwell, that Caldwell, New Jersey is named after, is part of that Caldwell family. But my great grandmother was Jane Caldwell, named after. But she father, or John Revels fathered a child, and John Revels was related to Hiram Revels. So Hiram Revels was the first, elected statewide official. He was from Guilford County, North Carolina. So my last name should be Revels.
Wonderful history.
And so I've written down that history, but we need to start as people get older. We need to begin. That's why Henry Gates is doing it. But Cecilia, I'd love to know your history and love. And so we as people, especially as people of color, if we don't tell our history, other people are going to tell it for us. And that's why I'm doing the Halls of Fame, because other people have told the history of Tulsa and others in their way. And I don't necessarily even blame them. We've got to step up and really start telling our history so that it's accurate. And that's one of the things that's missing.
Monmouth County has a lot of, Claire Garland is frequently with us, who, has
her,
done
right?
programs on Indigenous. And we've got such a history in Shrewsbury, which is a very white community. But if you really look at its history, all of they could be
Yeah.
great tours, they could
Yeah.
be, but
But the
It-
thing is,
it's
but
there, but-
it has to be permanent. It has to be permanent. So you see, one of the
Yeah.
things, everything you're saying is great, but we've got to
Yes.
something that has a permanent
Yeah.
memory, because when we're all
Marker.
dead and gone,
I
we
Yeah.
mean,
want
it's all
somebody to know that
there.
history.
You know,
Right.
it's all there, but we are
Yeah.
not bringing it out. We are not, yes, it's there,
Yeah.
but how do we get it out? How do we
Exactly.
present it to the others? And,
Yeah.
you know, that's what I'm trying to say. you
Yeah.
know.
Right,
Yeah.
slowly but surely, and down in Eatontown at the park, there's the Mingo Jack monument, right, Linda? There are
Yeah, and there's the
different
cemetery, Greenview, I mean,
things.
there are more things being done. There should be like walks when you go through town and
Right,
monuments really showing the history
history
of
of,
the area.
right.
It's all for the future, all things that, you know, certainly the group here, anybody that's interested in starting some of these things, you know.
And I think one of the things I
Feel free
wanted
to
to
get in touch.
Caldwell is also when I was shocked, you know, coming to Red Bank, I saw a Count Basie Theater. It's a big thing celebrated here, which is great.
Yeah.
But to see statue, I didn't even know he had a little statue near the train station because it was
Yeah.
all covered by bushes. So I
Yeah.
never saw that until the walk. That's when I
Yeah.
saw this little statue.
It should be larger.
It should be larger. It should be
It
presented
should be more
in-
prominent.
yeah,
People
more
are
prominent
working.
in town. I mean, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was totally shocked. I
Uh,
said, wow. You
We
know?
are at almost 8:35. It's
8:35.
been one
Oh,
of
yeah.
our very best conversations ever. It has been recorded. So, you know, for those that couldn't make it, hopefully many, many, many more people will be, you know, enjoying this. Dale, thanks so very much for
Thank
leading
you.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much, Dale. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Your
This was great. This was a great
participation.
conversation.
It was
Wonderful.
March is
Thank you so
Women's
much.
History Month, and we hope to have a program that celebrates women. So tune in and find out what's happening. We're always the last Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. And thank you again to everybody for
you.
being with
Thank
us.
you all.
Beautiful.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
Good night.
Okay, have a good night. Have a wonderful
Thank
night,
you.
everyone. Thank you again.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.